All right, for this demo, we're going to be building a Claude Artifact dashboard from a data subset. However, we're going to start with Kaggle, just something right off the shelf that's free, accessible, and somewhat relevant to some of my previous experience working in healthcare and pharma. We do want to look into the data set. We want to understand where the data set came from, how it's structured, and what some of the values mean, specifically the columns and the rows. And as we start to decipher these, it'll help with our understanding with how we can better visualize aspects of this data set and how we can really dig into the numerical data specifically, or any over time cadence data that will allow us to build graphs upon. So this particular data set contains structured drug-related data from drugs.com, range of pharmaceutical insights. If we go into the data set itself, here we have drug names, brand names, activities by pregnancy category, CSA alcohol, related drugs, conditions, and a handful of other numerical and information-related observations built into this one. So we want to bring it into Claude. The easiest way to start something in Claude that you want to refer back to and you want to remember the memory on is to create a project. It'll give you essentially a bucket of opportunity to play within a sandbox of a certain file, a certain area, or a certain string of prompts in which you'd like to put together sequentially. So this is going to be the drug demo set. And we're going to try to do a visualization with artifacts. So we'll create the project. And what we're going to do is upload the file directly. We'll throw this guy in here, drugs related clean data set. And how I like to build visualization specifically is by starting off with the persona of for a pharmaceutical healthcare company. So that's the persona we want to build. So we're going to say, act as a pharma researcher and help visualize the data in this analyst and help visualize the data in this data set by coordinating a filtration system allowing me to choose inputs and see associated outputs on the graph, allow for color coding and conditional formatting over time, and creates a corpus visualization of any side effects by the most common to the least. So that's a pretty hefty initial prompt. We're going to just try to build this out, give it a series of specific tasks as it pertains to the visualization of this data set in the perception of a pharmaceutical researcher. And the filtration system is allowing me to then essentially create which items I want to pick and choose so I can compare them on a graph against each other. Because when we're looking in data analytics, we always want to be able to compare good versus great and see how that benchmark performance allows us to understand which are outliers and which are true performance indicators, whether positive or negative. So on this graph specifically, we're going to ask for color coding and conditional formatting to then further help visualize the information. And if there is a group of text words that are side effects, a lot of the times the drug information that I've worked with has just kind of sentences together or paragraphs together of various side effects, maybe just separated by commas. We're going to see if we can create a corpus visualization from that. So we're going to throw this in. And now we're going to kind of wait a minute or two, see kind of what happened. It's going to strategically go through the data and visualize numbers as it pertains to certain drugs. And this is what I'm assuming, having not gone into this data set. Even before this step, you would generally want to go through the data, understand a bit more about what your goal is with that data, so then you have a destination in mind. But I'll tell you what, in a lot of the data analytics places I've worked in, it's more so just we need a dashboard and we need to get something up and running. So this is kind of your quickest way of doing that in a Lofi perspective. So we're going to see what its initial feedback is, and then we're going to do a quick assessment into our review. Is the data telling a story, and is it simple? Is all of the data included? Are there visual indicators which are not needed that we can remove, or is there certain kind of textual indicators that we need to add to help build the queue? You want people to be able to look at a chart and almost immediately understand what that chart is telling you within 5 to 10 seconds. So we need to seize on visualizing those important aspects within that window of opportunity. So as we're going through this, we're going to look through sizing, we're going to look through font size, we're going to look through colors, we're going to look at the hues, we're going to establish an understanding into what does a good contrast look like for a data set, how do we then conditionally format those special items, and then what is the actual data over time that's important to us. What we're also going to keep an eye out for is outliers. Are there any things that are coming out to us that are so off the charts that simply do not make sense? And it would actually make more sense to remove them from the chart itself or from the actual data set itself. Outliers can throw off statistics. They can throw off some of the more, I'd say, advanced statistical understanding models that you can build within a specific area. So we generally want to go through and remove those outliers and make sure that we understand, that performance kind of tip top and ceiling and floor. Furthermore, we also do want to understand like a benchmark level of performance if we are doing a comparative review. So for instance, if we're talking specifically about pharmaceutical brands in this specific case, whether generic or on brand, there's probably that rating associated with the product is where we would want to benchmark, like what is the average rating for this product class? What is the average rating for that product class? What is the, say, all right. So here we have Claude. It created a comprehensive pharmaceutical data visualization device, but it doesn't look like we are running the artifact. So this is a bit of a wall, right? I'll just hit try fixing with Claude. When I first started doing this, I would like copy and paste it and type it back in. But if you just hit fix, it'll kind of bring it to surface. When you go through a more successful report, what you actually want to do is go back to the previous version sometimes and then try a new prompt. You'll try to go through and find out what particular piece broke the prompt. A lot of times it could be like an element that you're visualizing or something that's moving around or floating, something like that. All right, so we're going to wait till this is going through. On a side note, it did look like it had the filtration system it added in. It added in color coding, the side effects corpus visualization, which is great. So here we go. Here's the most common side effects that we're then going to be able to visualize by size and commonality. The key research insights. So here we have kind of like the overview of this data set, right? What is the kind of the header, the footer of this data set? What is that general kind of, what is kind of that profile of the data set itself? And look, it already kind of pulled us some of these average ratings. So this is how it works with data. There's best practices built into data and analytics, machine learning, quantitative and qualitative analytics as well. And Claude and LLMs are a really good way for us to tap into these at a more advanced level, more granular level. There are limitations, of course. There's going to be areas where we're not able to visualize successfully. It looks like it went through, which is great. Now it looks like there's no drugs. So that's a problem. So what do we do here? Let's say it looks like there are data values associated with this article. Please populate the entire data set into the visualizer for usage. Enhance the UX as suggested per data and analytics best practices. All right, best practice. Sometimes these things work well, sometimes they don't. Clearly it told us and it forgot to put the data in, which is fine. Sometimes we do forget to put the pizza in the oven before we took the oven on. And look, it even did say, yes, you're right. Let me extract the data first. So we're going to give it another shot. We're going to ask it to go through it, populate the entire data set's worth of values into the visualization, and then enhance the UX as designed for the best practices of data and analytics. And this is something that I like to do specifically in vibe coding before going into Power BI or going into something like Tableau, where you would actually go through by hand and really kind of fine tune each particular graph, each particular area with stakeholders along with feedback to really disseminate exactly what they're looking for to then kind of optimize those decisions that are stemming from said dashboard, assuming that they're leading to growth of the business and actually providing value. Because if a dashboard's not providing value, then it's just another fancy object sitting on a shelf that's costing you a couple $100 a year in some cases. All right, so what it did is it truncated it for space. There was just too many objects for it to go through. And here are the real limits we see with vibe coding. And one of the reasons why you don't see vibe coding dashboards at work for a lot of different visualizations. When it comes to real-time data that requires an API or kind of that standard upkeep that you don't need to have, that's relatively hands-off, that's where Power BI, that's where Tableau are going to be unstoppable. And that's where your data analyst, your neighborhood data scientist, your data steward, or one of your teammates who might be very savvy in data and analytics are able to compose and compile an analytical dashboard that's built for you and your team. So again, I just wanted to get that out there for something that's really heavy duty that a lot of people are using and a lot of large decisions rely on. This is not the recommendation I would give. All right, so We see what it's working, we see what's not working. What we need to do is essentially, and this is how you would go through in a data product perspective, you would go through each subset chart with stakeholders, with your business, and with the engineer, and you would fact find to understand what works, what doesn't work, what they like and what they don't like. And over time, you would establish a benchmark indicator and then visual elements to help show how performance is. And essentially what you're doing is becoming more proactive with data and analytics. You're then pushing forward and allowing data to then drive your decision making, as opposed to something negative happening and then you reacting, which is mostly delivered via an email alert or a text message or something like that. You had the acne kind of data being pulled and associated, but the other data wasn't pulling in. Neither of it was complete. Let's take a step back. Let's slice the whole entire separate condition. Let's focus the whole entire dashboard now on acne in itself. And this is another lesson in data. Sometimes the data tells us a story. Sometimes it's not necessarily ready to be visualized. And when I say sometimes, I mean a lot of times in that particular aspect. And thus, we need to change and have a flexible strategy that we can adopt to that. Because if we're putting all of our eggs in the basket and we're assuming that a certain warehouse is clean, the hygiene is there, and the access is there as well, we then need to ascertain if that's going to be something that could completely throw off the probability of success, or if there's other areas that have a higher probability of delivering based on knowing that there's clean data there. Goes on to another lesson. I guess this is not like lesson number 4 or 5 now. Always keep a data analyst or a data steward close with you when you're talking about investing and building out certain assumptions into data, whether it's AI or data strategy. Don't ever assume that the basement is clean until you get down there and have a look for yourself. And if it's dark, you need to have someone who has night vision goggles. So think about it that way. All right, so we have our final product here. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. At this point. I'm going to publish it. We're going to copy the link. I'm going to post it in the comment section of this video. And let's go check it out. So let's throw this bad Larry up here. Let's see what we got going on. We have 17 treatments for acne. This is the acne treatment analytics visualization. The average rating is 6.7. There are 4,900 reviews. 12 of them are high risk. The top rating is here. Here are all the categories. Here are all the drug names. What I would do is my next step would be I would change search treatments to a dropdown. And side effects don't love. What do we want to change with that? Can we make that into a word cloud? Treatment class, that's all right. Treatment effectiveness versus patient feedback. I like this. This is something that you like to see. This is kind of like Shopifying these drugs as if you can buy them on Amazon, but that it is what it is. So what we're going to do is just throw this down here. Search treatment should be dropped down with filters for each treatment. Top rated treatments are below. And is there any way to summarize the top? Let's see if we can pull this through. No, let's just throw that in. All right, so at the very end, here's what we have. We have all of the treatments which we can pick and choose. Let's pick doxycycline. We can see the side effects, the treatment class, the patient feedback. We can see the safety, the efficacy. We can see some of the other top rated ones. So Absorica. Where is that? Absorica. So we have this one, and this has the common side effects, the percentages, the treatment class, all the other associated information. So it's almost better when we put all treatments because we can see them on a chart. And then here we have kind of the outliers. This is obviously the rating, and then this is the number of reviews. So obviously there should be like a certain threshold of what performance looks like. What you could then say is, hey, add a trend line, add a specific subset of information here. You could better color code these. These are right now color coded by safety profile. So you could actually color code these by rating, and you could use size for the size of the circles, for instance. So thanks for joining. I hope you found this helpful. Again, we're going to go through a couple of different other examples as to how we can use Claude Artifacts, Lovable, and also Gamma to create content associated with data visualization. But here's a good example as to something that you can use and build out with an artifact, for any data set. And, I just urge you to stick with it for a bit. If you break it, it's okay to go back and retry. Persistence is key with seeing these things through. And remember, try to add value, right? Don't just start to build stuff for the sake of building it like I am right now. So thank you, and have a great day.